And again, as an earlier teacher, I think I was more, this is embarrassing, but like I remember teaching Romeo and Juliet, which I love teaching. And I remember trying to be like, oh, well, I'm going to try to make this relevant to kids. And so I'm going to teach Romeo and Juliet, but I'm also going to talk about like a Snoop Dogg song.
For kids who feel different, the spaces around them can either help them shine or make them shrink. So what really makes an environment feel affirming? And how do we keep strengths at the center when the world is so focused on deficits? We're talking with award-winning educator and author Tom Rademacher about creating places where every kid feels like they belong. That's straight ahead on episode 287. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris, and this is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
What is neurodiversity? You see the world differently.
Autism spectrum.
Gifted.
Complexities that are inherently inside.
ADHD.
Dysgraphia.
Tourette's.
All brains are different.
You are exactly what this world needs.
This is the
Neurodiversity Podcast.
We've had a ton of new folks join the Educator Hub over the last week or so, and it's been amazing watching everyone start to introduce themselves and dive into the resources. People are already checking out the 5-minute PD videos, jumping into discussion threads, and bookmarking tools they can bring straight into their classrooms. The doors close on Friday, so if you're listening to this right as the episode comes out, there is still time to join us. And if you're catching this later, no worries. You can always head over to neurodiversity.university to make sure you're on the list to get emailed as soon as the doors open next time. We would love for you to be a part of it. We will also, of course, put the link in the show notes. Okay, my conversation with Tom is up next.
On a recent episode of the Neurodiversity Podcast.
When you use the term school-induced trauma, what are you really describing, and how do you see that showing up in the students that you work with?
When I was looking closely at the words, is it school-based? Is it school-induced? Yes, they can be used interchangeably, but school-induced trauma really defines causation. It is the school environment that is causing this trauma. I understand why some people would say that calling these situations trauma can be disregarding of some more intense traumas, but like you said, you're looking at a neurodiverse population, or I am. And they're more at risk for trauma, and their nervous systems are more sensitive. And so, yes, it is enough to say that when they're in this situation, it can create a trauma.
That's episode 282, Surfing Waves of Emotion Through Emotional Regulation. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Tom Rademacher is my guest today. Tom is an award-winning educator and author who spent more than 20 years in the classroom and is now a professor in the teacher licensure program at Reach University's Oxford Teachers College, where he helps prepare the next generation of educators. He's the author of several books, including 50 Strategies for Learning Without Screens, It Won't Be Easy, Raising Ollie, and his new chapter book series, Bucket and Friends. He was named Minnesota Teacher of the Year in 2014 and is known for bringing humor, heart, and honesty to his teaching, writing, and when advocating for students. Tom, thanks for talking to me today.
I am delighted to be here. I've been excited all day thinking about it.
I think we should mention here that you and I know each other. You were involved in the production and publication of the book I wrote with Amanda Morin, Creating Neurodiversity Affirming Schools. And I know our focus on neurodivergent learners really spoke to you because of the work you've done. And I'd like to start off having you describe what you think makes an environment affirming for students. Like, what are the factors that go into that?
I think it's interesting because as an educator, our number one job really has to be to make our students feel comfortable and welcome in our space. And what's interesting about that is how often it is not a heavy lift. Sometimes it's the little things, little touches, little ways you say something. I mean, I guess I would say like my favorite compliment that I would get, and it wasn't always meant as one, is that when kids would come into my room, especially, so I often was teaching 8th grade, and whether it was a 7th grader or a 6th grader walked in or something like that, they'd walk in, be in my room for the first time, and they'd be like, this classroom feels like a living room. And I was always like, thank you. Like, that's great. I don't need it to feel institutional in here. And very often that was just a matter of like having lamps instead of overhead lights and making my books look nice instead of putting them in like big Tupperware bins. And, just like little things of like, yeah, I want it to feel welcoming in here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the space of being affirming. Beyond that, I often would just, also be willing to share a little about myself with students. So usually early in the year, I would talk about my struggles with anxiety and also how it's probably also a bit of a superpower in the productivity it gives me. And on some days, and on other days, they're ceiling staring days, but putting myself out there as being vulnerable and also being willing to learn from students. So over and over again in my career, I've worked with populations of kids that either didn't reflect my own personal experience or my own personal culture or any number of things. And rather than coming in and being like, cool, I'm just going to like pretend like I understand what that means, I would just be very open about asking questions of kids, or when, a new slang word comes up and I don't know that slang word. And it's like, it's okay to not know that slang word. In fact, knowing it and trying to use it is usually the wrong way to go about it. But like kids love to explain that stuff and they love to be able to teach their teacher about something, or just, I'm into this band, this thing, this movie, this whatever. And I don't know that I ever saw that as anything all that big until raising my own child, who is far better at verbalizing the world that he moves through than I am often. And somewhere in the middle school years, I remember him telling me that like there's nothing more important to him or no way that he shows friendship or caring someone than like listening about someone else's special interests. Like it's like very much his like love language or whatever with his friends is like, oh, this person is super hyper fixated on this weird series from the 1990s. And so I'm going to watch the series so that I can talk to them about it. And I think that kind of being curious about what other people are into, how they see things, is maybe the most crucial part of welcoming them in a classroom or just like in your presence.
You mentioned that piece about the self-disclosure and talking about your own experiences. And there's a fear, I think, that a lot of people have if they are in some sort of a leadership role, whether that's literally like in a business leadership or whether it's a teacher who's, in the leadership role in their classroom or whatever. I guess like this idea of feeling so uncomfortable about any sort of vulnerability and not wanting to label those things and having to look and feel like you're always in control. I've never approached things that way. And when I see that happening, I recognize how much that truly undermines the culture of an environment. I think that's even true in households as well, where parents, like if you're able to just be open about what's going on, just feeling that connection, like you're moving together through something as opposed to being directed to do something.
1,000%. And I think that the early years of teaching for me, I worked so hard to keep control. And it took me many years to realize that like I never had it, nor is seeking it like a really good idea. And I think that that's something that is hard for us to tell ourselves internally, but it's so easy to see someone else doing when you're like, whoa, that person is being really intense about either always acting like everything is perfect and fine and not admitting when they messed up, not admitting when they don't know, or when they're like trying to really establish firm control in a situation that, again, externally, you can look at that person and be like, wow, they're really insecure right now. Or like that actually comes across as a weakness when you're trying to portray that strength often.
Yeah.
And we can see that in other people, and it's harder to recognize that in ourselves of like, I'm presenting as this like kind of strong man because I am scared, or I am worried that I don't know, or I am worried that I will look anything other than expert, anything other than capable or whatever. And then as I actually got competent and capable as a teacher, like I was able to start letting a lot of those pieces go. But I definitely wish I would have done so earlier.
It is interesting, the generational differences, I think, in how we're approaching some of the things that are related to neurodivergence, but just general things as far as like communication has shifted so much, maybe partially because of social media and other types of technology. Actually, here's something that happened recently. My middle daughter is 15. She's going to be a sophomore. She would be fine with me sharing this, but she is very much like kind of into the whole emo look. Like she's got these amazing Converse, black Converse high tops that go up to her knees, first of all, which are indeed very cool. Mm-hmm. She loves the whole aesthetic. I'll give a shout out to her favorite band called Sleeping with Sirens, but she's got the hair and the makeup and whatever. But here's the fascinating thing about this. We go out places, to the mall, like public places, and kids around her age come up to her and will say things like, I love your outfit, or I love your aesthetic, or your hair looks amazing. People who she doesn't know. And I look back on my experience, I'm like going, I can't imagine going up and saying that to somebody or having somebody else say it to me. But I feel like that's kind of this Gen Z. But I love it. And you mentioned earlier about your child being able to kind of articulate things. Do you feel like that's a generational thing, or do you think what do you think that's about?
I do think that in many, many ways, and obviously not universally, but I think in so many ways, this generation of kids is like hyper literate in ideas. I mean, when I went through my like high school, I want to be a communist phase, you know, like I had to drive into Madison, Wisconsin and go to State Street to a bookstore that had the Communist Manifesto that I could carry in my backpack and pretend like I had read, even though I never did. And that was about what I had, you know, like the students that have grown up in a rich internet environment are able to not only learn about things, but also find community with people who are, you know, like-minded or have that interest or who are very different, but you connect with through some other project or something. And I think you learn so much about how to navigate that part of the world. Like I've definitely seen that. My kid is very into like going to conventions and stuff, or just around like nerd culture things. And that's really interesting because he is someone who, I mean, the amount of money I would have been willing to pay before they created online ordering to not have to call to order like a pizza on the phone, like especially if someone else was in the room, like I would need to go hide to use the phone. The idea of going up to a stranger, talking to a stranger, whatever, is a nightmare. And he can often be like that. And then when he gets around peers, that does seem to drop away. Mm-hmm. The same kind of experience of he'll go up to people and be like, oh, your cosplay is really awesome, or like, I love that shirt, that's really cool, or just like, you know, in the years that I have taught and worked with young people, even seeing a development of, oh, people do different kinds of stuff and they present in different ways and they are interested in different kinds of things, and that is okay, does feel more and more prevalent in comparison to just how much it feels like also adults have gotten just worse and worse and worse at that. So
yeah. What we're also talking about is identity, whether we're talking about neurodivergent people identifying with their label or diagnosis, or whether it's a fandom, you know, like you see at the conventions. There's something about that sense of community. How can educators and parents and families, how can we help lean into that? I feel like there are benefits, and it almost goes back to a little bit about what we were talking about earlier, even just with some of the self-disclosure and about developing a relationship. How do you see the importance of noticing and valuing identity in young people, and how can we take advantage of that, you know, and build those relationships in that way?
I mean, I think my answer to that is what I've been thinking a lot about lately, also just with the political climate and how much teachers are very much in the crosshairs right now of some culture war nonsense. And so I know that there is so much fear about, well, I don't want to teach about X, Y, and Z topic because then I'll be in the news. And again, as an earlier teacher, I think I was more, this is embarrassing, but like I remember teaching Romeo and Juliet, which I love teaching. And I remember trying to be like, oh, well, I'm going to try to make this relevant to kids. And so I'm going to teach Romeo and Juliet, but I'm also going to talk about like a Snoop Dogg song and how the chorus is structured slightly like a sonnet. And like, well, I mean, like it was some real white guy trying to be down stuff that was real. It was real rough. And like, bless those kids for not just like laughing me out of there. But, you know, I think, again, it's that thing of if you get in front of the room and you're like, I'm going to teach about 10 different topics that you all are really interested in, you're going to mess every one of them up. I did everything I could to figure out the one or two skills or standards or whatever it was that I was trying to teach at the time, and then give students as many pathways as possible to show that they are doing that thing. And I feel like we often restrain that second piece of it. As a teacher, as I kept evolving as a teacher, I started using fewer and fewer full class novels. And the ones I used were ones that I had really decided a communal experience reading this is really important. And then I would use very, very few quizzes or work projects or whatever along with it. I'd be like, no, we're reading this to read it all together. Mouse was a really good example of that one. Like we would read Mouse. I thought it was important to read it all together and to discuss it together, but I wasn't going to hand out a Mouse worksheet. That just feels weird. But when I did analysis, every student would pick their own book. And there would be a lot of ways that we would do that and help that and facilitate that. But it meant that they could lean into what they were interested in a little bit more. It also meant that students could read books that they had picked that I would get in trouble for assigning to them. And the same would be true when we did, you know, we would practice literary analysis by analyzing video and art. And I would bring in a couple that I really liked, but then students would bring in something that they wanted to analyze and analyze it for the class. And so they were bringing in things that shared their special interest or their opinion or their perspective. And there was a lot of work on making sure that we knew how to listen and be like, oh, I totally disagree with you, but that's okay. I'm just here to listen to your perspective. Offering choice as often as I could and as broadly as I could for students meant that on so many days and on the walls of my classroom and in the stuff that we were reading and sharing, they were represented and their personalities were represented and their experiences were represented. And in so many ways where like I didn't have to go digging. The last school I taught in had a large Tibetan population. And I didn't have to go try to find quick one poem by a Tibetan author so that I can make sure that they're like a lot of projects that those students did involved Tibet, involved their families move over, involved what it was like to be an immigrant. And so they got to bring that in however they wanted.
Yeah, giving that autonomy and making it real. Like if you're just going out and finding something to kind of check this box, it's not as authentic. But when you give kids the voice to share about their own experiences, that really goes a long way. I
mean, it's just incredibly powerful. The number of things that I have learned about and gotten fascinated by because I let students bring in their own thing is so big. And once you create that culture and you show interest, you're going to hear from students again and again and again about it. So I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD right around the time that we started working on the book at all together. And so it was actually like this amazing welcome into community for me of all these things starting to make sense that I had not to that point understood. And partially, I think it took me that long to get diagnosed because ADHD was many, many times strength as an 8th grade teacher. It was like,
sure.
it was a better fit for that than the years I spent editing manuscripts, right? Where sitting down, editing a manuscript for 8 hours, all of a sudden
is
I was
my
like,
guest today. Tom is an award-winning educator and author who spent more than 20 years in the classroom and is now a professor in the teacher licensure program at Reach University's Oxford Teachers College, where he helps prepare the next generation of educators. He's the author of several books, including 50 Strategies for Learning Without Screens, It Won't Be Easy, Raising Ollie, and his new chapter book series, Bucket and Friends. He was named Minnesota Teacher of the Year in 2014 and is known for bringing humor, heart, and honesty to his teaching, writing, and when advocating for students. Tom, thanks for talking to me today. I think we should mention here that you and I know each other. Yeah. You were involved in the production and publication of the book I wrote with Amanda Morin, Creating Neurodiversity Affirming Schools. And I know our focus on neurodivergent learners really spoke to you because of the work you've done. And I'd like to start off having you describe what you think makes an environment affirming for students. Like, what are the factors that go into that? It's interesting how having this late diagnosis for ADHD, and I hope it's okay for me to share, being the parent of a neurodivergent child, that also has then influenced the current work that you're doing, which is a recent book series, which is called Bucket and Friends.
Yep.
It's a story that's meant for kids. It's primarily geared for kind of upper elementary. Am I right with that?
Yep.
But it really speaks to anyone who's ever felt a little out of step. Can you tell us a little bit about Bucket's story and how that came to you? But I'm also really curious about how your personal experiences kind of influenced the development of that story.
It was an interesting journey in that I had never written and published fiction before. And I had started to think about a series of units or lessons that I had done of like, man, these are the things from teaching that I really want to share, like my experiences that were distinctly powerful to me or I thought were really helpful for kids. And I thought about the different ways I could bring them out into the world and wanting to communicate them more directly to students, because so many of them are about identity and questioning and like questioning the world and also agency. Like I think agency and optimism are probably the two big words in the whole series. Both words that don't show up in the series at all, I think, but are
the theme.
Yeah.
Yes.
And somewhere along the way, thinking about one of the projects specifically that I really enjoyed, it was like the first line of the book just popped in my head. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like that's as a character saying that. And that's as a young character saying that. And I just kind of dove in and started writing it. And it all took shape very easily, but it was also very freeing. It's completely reshaped the way that I am writing nonfiction now. I think I allowed myself to I think I stopped masking in my writing in a way that I had never quite realized that I had. And I had read a couple books recently by neurodivergent writers, fiction and nonfiction. One was Conversations with Monsters, which is just this beautiful, beautiful memoir-ish kind of stream of thought book. And then one was Interesting Facts About Space, is a fiction book written by a neurodivergent writer. And both of those books have just like incredible... I've described it as being like when someone hits like a tuning fork. And it was like, oh, that completely buzzes the part of my brain in a way that a lot of other writing never has. This person has the same brain as me, or like in many ways, I'm like, oh, that's cool to see that reflected, and it's not reflected. So I had read those and thought about the ways in which I had struggled against that in my writing, and I had struggled against letting my writing really reflect the way that my brain operated, and being like, oh, it's a great way, and it is a great way for me to put down ideas and then put them in order that makes sense and take out the long tangent about whatever thing, you know, like Monet's eye surgery, but like is like my most common sidebar. But I think writing fiction let me do that. I just saw a review of my book where the person said, like, for people who have brains that go off on tangents and side stories, like, you're going to see yourself reflected in this. And I was like, yay, like, that's fantastic. Because I just sort of let Bucket, the lead character, I just want it to be like you're inside of their brain and they're just like off on a whole thing. And I think normalizing that in a lot of ways. And there's characters throughout that, you know, obviously as a someone who taught well over 1,000 students in my years, like a lot of the characters are mashups or representations of students who I taught who meant a lot to me or impacted me in a big way. And there are so many pieces in there about emotional regulation and struggling to control anger, for example, and struggling to communicate in ways that other people are understanding. And a lot of things that fall somewhere in that spectrum of neurodivergence or of, I mean, just of being a different person, different, you know, and just the words aren't there. This bucket, it never says like, oh, because of ADHD, I blah, 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 blah. You know, like I'd rather it be, this is bucket, who they are. Their friends especially are very cool about it. And their friends are all on different wavelengths all over, but they're very good at understanding like, oh, when this person says this, it's really important for this reason. And I understand how to, you know, without having to say like, oh, well, this friend, here are the technical terms for this. Like, I'd rather show the world as it is of like, yeah, lots of people are very different in lots of ways. And so it's really great to learn how to navigate that and not just navigate it, but deeply appreciate it. It's almost always in the books represented as a strength or shown as a strength for that character in at least a few situations, especially with Bucket. You still get some of the struggles and stuff like that along the way. But like I said, with anxiety, like it's a superpower sometimes and it's a difficulty sometimes.
Do you see yourself writing more fiction?
Yeah, I think so. There was one Bucket book that didn't get through this round that was much more about kind of activism, but we never quite got it to work. But like, I think about it every other day or so about like, maybe I want to go back in and fix that one up. And I loved being with those characters. And so I could totally see whether they stay where they're at or they grow up or I write about them when they were younger. Who knows, but I think I will keep doing that. And then some part of it, like I said, unlocked pieces in my writing that I'm not sure where it's going to go yet.
Yeah.
I've been writing it must be a 15,000 word piece about visual art, which I'm not, like, I know nothing about. I've been writing it for over a year. And if and when I finish it and post it, no one will read it. And that's fine. And maybe I'll do that from now on. And I'm kind of tired enough of the internet that everything I write from now on, I might just like print 10 copies of and throw out my window while I drive and then just be like, cool, I published it, it's done. And then it's interesting. I think the whole concept between the Bucket and Friends book series is brilliant. And I feel like a lot of kids are really going to feel seen, you know, as they read it, and maybe their parents will too. And, you know, their teachers, but I'm really happy that we had the chance to connect and talk today. I have one last question for you. If you were talking to a student who doesn't quite fit, whether that's because they're neurodivergent or they are different in some other way, what would you want to say to them? Like what encouragement would you just really want them to hear? You know, I think deeper about ADHD and how it shows up in the world. I think often about things I wish I would have heard while I was in school struggling, specifically in math, where there was a point that I hit it where working memory was required and it just didn't work, you know, and I think I wish I would have heard that there's no way that a working brain is wrong or right. And there are differences that make some things easier and make some things harder. And I think I needed to know that some things were legitimately harder because I felt so bad when I struggled with them, especially when you struggle and you see other people do it pretty easily. What's your tagline always kills me. Something with the weird.
Oh, a little weird is good.
A little weird is good. I think I would have gone a little further and been like, lean into your weird.
Yeah.
Like, your weird is probably where all of your brilliance or a lot of your brilliance is. And rather than try to figure out all the ways to cover it up and make it work and package it to be normal, you're going to rob the world of so much of like the best of what you can do and what you can bring in. Like, I love weird art so much, and I think about some of the things that are my favorite things in the whole world, and it's like, man, if that person hadn't allowed themselves to just go full on into their own weird, we would be missing that.
Yeah.
Recognize where it's hard, and recognize also that it's hard to lean into your weird, because you will find places where you get friction because of that. But that it's also where your brilliance is.
Tom Rademacher, author of the Bucket and Friends book series. Thanks for talking to me today.
This was a real joy, and I'm just really glad. I'm really glad you're out in the world doing all the things you do. You put so much good into the world, and I'm really thankful.
Tom reminded me that it is tempting to chase the numbers, test scores, and progress charts and behavior points, because that's what so many systems push us toward. But the real work, the work that actually changes kids' lives, comes from connection. Kids aren't inspired by a graph. They're inspired by people who show up for them, even when things are messy. And that's where authenticity comes in. Being human, being honest, being willing to say, I don't know, but I'll figure it out with you. That's what kids remember. It gives them permission to bring their whole selves too, which is what belonging is really about. When we can let go of looking perfect and focus on being present, that's when we create the spaces where kids feel safe to grow. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. I'll see you next time on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Tom Rademacher was our guest today. We have links in the show notes so you can learn more and take a peek into his world. Also, if you haven't joined our listener group on Facebook or subscribed to our Facebook page or checked out our YouTube channel or followed us on Instagram, I put links to all of those things in the show notes. Oh, Blue Sky as well. We're there, too. Our host is Emily Kircher-Morris. Corey Orrick is our office manager and production assistant. I'm the executive producer, Dave Morris. For all of us, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. This is a service of the Neurodiversity Alliance.